Hello, and welcome to the NOTstalgia podcast.
A podcast where we discuss the retelling or continuation of pop culture favorites as seen through a queer and feminist lens.
My name is Eric Lefebvre.
And my name is Jessica Tercero.
And this week, we watched
Bill
and Ted.
And Bill and Ted. And Bill and Ted.
Bill and Ted. Yeah, so we watched Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. Is that the name of the first one?
Yes.
And then we watched Bill and Ted Face the Music. So we did skip Bogus Journey, but for the podcast, it feels more... You watched it in this process?
I did.
Oh,
so
okay.
I watched that in the process because I felt like it was important, but we're not going to really discuss that one.
Yeah, because I feel like Face the Music is more of what the podcast is about, where it's like reviving this old property in a way to fuel the nostalgia fire that is new spectators on this story, right? So yeah. It just felt more like, I don't know. I'm still trying to caffeinate myself. I am asleep. It felt right. We did the first and the third one. Go watch the second one on your own. Bonus round, extra credit.
Yeah. So before I knew that we were going to do this, like a couple of weeks ago, I watched the first two, Excellent Adventure and Bogus Journey. And I had a great time with both of those. And I was just like, man, I have a lot to say on the representation of women, but overall, this was another set of films that was delightful to watch right now in 2020 and COVID and all of the horrible things. It was a nice break, and it was really nice to be reminded of friendship and what that looks like, and being so like open and honest and yes and like just fucking like really being there for somebody and like being on that same wavelength where you're talking at the same time. And that was so delightful, and it filled me with so much joy. Yeah,
it's a very fun story. I mean, the first one's just a very fun, I'd never seen it before, so this was my first time. I'd only seen the second one. But Bill and Ted, it's just fun. It's very silly. Like, I do have some notes just on general critique, but overall, it's just a silly story with some messy shit, but it's fun. It's a fun adventure. It's like a ride at Universal Studios, right? Like, you go into each room and then you're like on this thing, and then the payoff is them saving the world, and you're like, oh wow, we did it, and then you buy a shirt on the way out. It's what it feels like to me.
Oh, I felt a lot deeper than that.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, see, yeah. To me, it wasn't very deep. To me, it was just very surface fun, silliness.
I think I watched this a long time ago, and then I watched this a couple weeks ago, and I watched it again today. And I remember, like, maybe it's because it wasn't my first watch. Like, so being able to watch this and be like, I love what this is saying about friendship and about being there and about like, and just like, I was here for all of the ridiculousness that all of the, just like take me out of whatever world I'm in and transport me here. And I think it did a lot of really great subtle things. Well, we'll get into all of it, but I really liked it a lot.
Cool. I'm excited to talk about it. Should we just jump in?
Let's do it.
Let's do it.
We begin our most excellent adventure in 1988 San Dimas, California, where our dudes, Bill S. Preston, Esquire, and Ted Theodore Logan, have to pass history class or be sent to military school. While asking strangers for history facts at the Circle K, Rufus, a dude from the future, tells them they are destined to save the world with their music. They just need to ace this history report. Then he gives them a time-traveling telephone box, not the TARDIS, to help them with their quest for knowledge. Bill and Ted subsequently travel across time, meeting and collecting famous historical figures for their presentation, and take them back to San Dimas 1988. Talk about a culture shock.
Bill and Ted take everyone to the mall while trying to hunt down Napoleon at the local water park. In their absence, Billy the Kid, Socrates, Abraham Lincoln, Beethoven, Joan of Arc, Sigmund Freud, and Genghis Khan all get arrested for being too extra. Bill and Ted break them out of jail with the help of Bill's mom, Missy, and they present a most excellent oral report which earns them an A+ and a couple of princess girlfriends. Party on, dudes!
Party on, dudes!
Hell yeah.
Man, we really need to like work on our like being able to talk at the same time. That was something that like watching this movie, like they are just so fucking on that same wavelength. And like even to the point to where when they play guitar, mostly in like in the third one, but like they're playing the exact same thing, just like an octave higher at the exact same time. And like it's very, very cute.
They're Iron Maidening. Right. Where they do that dual guitar solo. I first want to start off by saying Keanu Reeves' neck work, overall, this is just like a blanket statement. What a lot of neck. Because like with that, I don't know if it was a wig. It might have been his hair. It's a wig in the second one. That is a bad wig. But the first one, I think that was just his hair. Anyways, I feel like every time he walks, he's like shaking. He's like, it's always like a turn or a bob or like whenever he walks, it's just like back and forth. So silly, so cartoonish. I loved every second of it. His neck put in the work in this movie.
He also, like, from what I was reading, like, he was like, no, my hair has to be. So he was like trying to make it big. Like, the more cartoony this character was, the better it was for him. And he really leaned into that. So he would be like, no, hold on. And he had to like make his hair all like big and like wild. So like that was a part of it. And it's like so fun because he like leads with his neck and his shoulders, right? And that was something, not to get into the second one, but like, or the third one. But like the people that play their daughters, they ended up studying those movements so precisely. Like, so when you look at Thea and you look at Billy, they really inhabit so many of those mannerisms. It's it's really cool. So where do you want to start with this?
I really only have one big surface thing, which is them using the F slur. In what felt like to me, like watching it, I was like, this is so great and they're so cool. And then that came out of nowhere. And I was like, who wrote that? Like, get it? This is so out of character for these guys. Like, you're establishing their friendship. Like, I mean, I guess people use that word a ton. Straight people did. I mean, I grew up hearing it so much. And in the 90s, I'm sure it was even worse. And before that, even worse. You know what I mean? But it was just so out of place. And it felt like you could have it was for no reason, literally. They could have hugged next scene. It's like, could have hugged, no, what did they say? Like, not a fag, what is like, I don't know. It was also a clunky line reading of it. It was like a clunky line in a bad place with just like a silly word, like, y'all.
And didn't it come after like one of them thought that they were dead, like this is in like the medieval place, right? So like one of them thought that the other one was dead and was just so sad, and then he comes out and he's like, it's cool, dude, like I'm fine. And then they like give each other a hug because they love each other so much. And I feel like that had to have been like a studio thing where it's like, we can't even like, you know, one of those things just to say like, no, 100% no. And that was it. Yeah, it felt gross and it felt messy. And that's really like the one part where I really had to like be like, oof, and like take a step back and just be like, if they deleted that line, like they could just take it out and you wouldn't even know, right?
You wouldn't even know it. It's so it is so unimperative. It is the most like, it's also so out of place. Like they hug and then they say and they like stand there awkwardly and then it clunks itself into the next scene. It being there, not only just the word itself, but like the staging, the whole performance of it is such an impediment to the flow of the story that I was like, this, like, and again, you're totally right. It feels very much just like their love for each other is incredibly obvious. This very platonic, trusting, loving, like brothers. Like they love each other so much. They get each other in a way that literally nobody else does. We see that. They did a really good job in communicating that with us, the viewer. We know this. They know this. We all know this. So that line as just a definitive way to just be like, they're not gay. Don't worry. Like they will not kiss. They're not gay. They don't have gay thoughts. They're not gay. They're not gay. They're not gay. It just felt like if somebody else threw that in there, that seems, it's so out of world, out of character. Again, they're two teenage straight boys in the 90s, but at the same time, I've seen nothing but kindness and goodness from these two people. So for this like really gross moment to happen, it was just like, it was out of character. It was out of place. And I was like, what? And apparently both actors have said, like, we really regret that. Because they say it in the second one, too, I think.
They do, yeah.
They do, yeah. And both actors apparently have regretted it. And even at the time had said it felt wrong. It felt incorrect. It didn't feel of character, of world. So, yeah, I think that's the only big clunker I have with this movie.
Yeah, you're right. Like, it does feel just so completely out of place because of the absolute love that these two people have for each other. And like you said, like, it's clear that it's very platonic and it's very, like, brotherly or just very close. And, like, to the point to where, like, they're always looking out for each other, literally, like, when he tells him, oh, hold on, there's some shit in your way, right? And he's like, oh, thanks, dude, right? Like, and they never take offense to anything that the other says. Like, they kind of, like, if it seems weird, they kind of, like, stop and, like, think for a second, and then they're like, oh, okay. Like, they think about the intent that this person has when they're talking to them because there's so much love and trust there. Yeah. And I think that that's something, we're not going into the second one, but that's something, like, the reason why they kind of fall for the robot trick, right? Like, from the future is because they're just like, oh, yeah, okay. You know? So, like, part of what is so great about them is just their willingness to trust each other and trust other people. You know, like, they really do live their mantra where they just be excellent to each other. They're excellent to literally everybody that they meet. And we see that type of, like, you know, like, hey, dude, hey, what's going on? Hey, let's go, right? And just, like, being there for each other influences all of the figures that they collect, right? Maybe other than Napoleon, because he doesn't spend a lot of time with them, right? But, like, everybody else, especially, like, I'm thinking of Billy the Kid and, like, Socrates, right? But
Socrates.
Like, they start saying dude, and they're just kind of there for each other, and they're very just like, cool, this is what we're doing now, we're gonna be here, and they just have that level of trust. So, like, the way that they carry themselves and present themselves in the world, they're not harming anybody, and they're also making sure that they're not, I don't know, like, just them being great people helps influence other people to be better people, like, even questionable tyrants like Genghis Khan.
Yeah.
Kindness. Okay.
I mean, that's the biggest characteristic that they both have. I mean, the biggest two are kindness and empathy. They both not only connect with each other in this way where they get each other, like you had explained, but also with every other character. There's never this assumptive thing. They always, like, no matter what even time they're in, which, I mean, adds to the humor of, like, their lackadaisical aspect to being in what is considered the Wild West in this movie, or being in all of these dangerous positions, and they're just kind of like, oh yeah, let me get a beer, or like, I'll just walk in here and just say whatever, or what, you know what I mean? There's, like, the cartoonish sort of childish ignorance that they carry with themselves that just amplifies that kind of kindness and empathy. There's never an assumed anything about any character. With the princesses, with Billy the Kid, with Socrates, it's always like, oh, I've heard of you. Let's talk and maybe talk about stuff. Who knows who you are? Like, tell me about yourself. You know what I mean? It's just, they're good. They're good people.
It feels like they're so willing to challenge their perspective. Like, if something, like, doesn't compute or something seems different, rather than being like, no. They're like, they take that second to stop, think, and be like, oh, okay, and immediately change their perspective. And that carries through, I think, through all of these. There's never a point where they're like, no, that's not how it is. It's like, oh. So their ability to do that is really great, I think. And something else that is really, really subtle is Bill and Ted are actually really smart. Like, they do become wiser throughout the whole thing. Like, you know, in the sense that maybe at the beginning they forget to wind the watch, they forget to do all these things, right? But then at the end, like, think about all the stuff they had to go back and do. They had to go back and grab the keys and put them in the thing, and remember to go and grab these and put this here, and remember to go and grab this, like, after the fact for all of this, right? They're also the ones, the writer, he said that he regrets not showing, like, that the lights were actually Bill and Ted in that last performance. So they went back and they did all the lights and they did all the things. All of the things that we see that go their way are because Bill and Ted went back and made sure to be there and do these things and make all of these things happen. So to remember all of that, right? Because, like, these characters are being portrayed as kind of like, not the smartest people, maybe, like you're supposed to think they're a little bit dumb. And but to see that they remember to do all this stuff, they're also really smart about like, oh, I need to grab the keys. Let's do this, and they're like leaving themselves little notes too, being like, hey, Bill and Ted, you guys are great. Also duck, Yeah,
I love that. I loved that scene in the police station.
Yeah. And doing that, and then also like knowing where to find all these people, right? Like they're like, oh yeah, Billy the Kid, blah, blah, blah. Like, in the beginning, they say Joan of Arc was Noah's wife, right?
Yes.
Towards the end, like rather than having Abraham Lincoln or Abraham Lincoln gave his own speech, but like, they talk about like, this is who Socrates is and this is what he does. And then this is Genghis Khan and this is what he did. And so they're like, through their journey, it like implies that they're also taking the time to get to know these characters. And I really loved that they were going straight to the source. And we all know that like history is written by the victor and it's selective and it's maybe not accurate, right? So rather than just like picking up a book, like there's different ways that everybody learns, right? Not everybody learns from reading a book. Some people are audible learners. Some people are visual learners. Some people are this, right? So rather than, so book learning is not for them. They want to go and they're going to go straight to the source to meet these people and get their stories firsthand. And rather than reading about them in a book. How fucking cool is that?
I thought that was really cool too. I mean, it's cool just in the sense of establishing an adventure story. Because I mean, it's just a cool concept to be like, we're going to go throughout time. It's like Magic School Bus, but make it surfer, make it California. You know what I mean? Like it's like make it goofy high school. Yeah, I think there was a level of like the lack of struggle they had in each of these time periods to me was very funny. Like it was so easy for them to coax these historic figures who see them they're strangers completely, like Socrates. They do not speak Greek. Like they're not speaking even close to the same language. He's like, us, sand, time. And then Socrates says that funny, and so through the hourglass, so are the days of our lives. There it is. He does that days of our lives quote, which is like, oh, very funny and like we love. But in every point in time, they get these people to come with them with such ease, which you could argue is just their general kindness and whimsy and like energy, like very trustworthy energy that they both kind of carry with them, because they're not deceitful, they're not bad, they're like, and we'll get into it in the second one, but like even in the second one, when they try to lie to their past selves, they do a terrible job. They can't lie. They're not good at lying. They're not good at deceiving people. Like even with their wives, like it's so that. But again, that's a whole. I want to get into that then, but. I just thought it was very funny that like, it's just like, oh, just come with us and come speak at our high school. What's a high school? We'll show you. Like that wasn't a line in there, but I feel like that's like that could be a scene. Like what? I don't know. It just, that to me, again, just adds to the silliness of it. It's not a negative. It's not like well, this is a plot hole. And like they're time traveling in a phone booth to like it's
80s.
Obviously a silly funny adventure movie, but I thought it was charming and also very silly with the ease with which they got these historical figures to come with them. And I also love Napoleon's entire separate adventure with his little brother.
So amazing.
It was
so
very
good.
fun. Like them bowling and him speaking like all of this very governing, astute French. You're like, oh, stop. Like it's like, you need to stop and sit down. He's like, oh, okay, like whatever. Them trying to ditch him at the bowling alley. Also, this wasn't like, oh my gosh, if I would have saw this when I was a kid, this would be definitely one of those movies that was a bit of a sexual awakening. Not because I had a crush on Napoleon, the actor who played Napoleon, but when he's at the water park, he very clearly is not wearing underwear. Is he wearing a jockstrap?
Okay. Yeah, you can see like a little G-string. Yeah.
Because you see full butt cheeks under that. And there's a couple moments where like it does look like jockstraps, so you're seeing butt, but there's a couple other ones where it's like he gets up and it's like the front and I don't think he's wearing anything. And I remember just being like, oh my gosh, if I was like a young gay watching this, it would have imprinted in my mind as a very seminal, very specific moment to be like, remember this.
Remember Napoleon.
Remember Napoleon. It's so silly. But I digress. I liked it a lot.
I love what a baby he was too. Like, and I love taking a lot of these leaders out of their time where they are in charge and nobody gives a shit and they're just a kind of a joke, you know? And so like Napoleon being like, you know, like, this is my ice cream, like doing the like, Chah! And then they're like, piggy. And he's like, whatever, like, I like this. And like his passion for, and also like all of them, their acceptance of the future and of how things work, not being like, no, this is not how this is, blah, 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 right? You know, but their intellect where they're able to be dropped in a world that is unlike anything that they've ever seen before and go with it. And like actually allow themselves to experience it rather than just being afraid, just being courageous in like in these small things of like, what's an escalator? What is this treat? You know? So I think that's also a testament to these leaders, right?
Yeah. The culture shock moments were probably my favorite part. Again, it's the characters interacting in a world. It's very yes and. Is it believable? Obviously, this story is so it's a wacky story. So we're not going to be like, I don't think Napoleon Bonaparte would have eaten that ice cream. Or, I mean, we'll get into the Joan of Arc thing because I do think there's something to be said for that. However, overall, it's very fun and whimsical. So them investigating this future they're so unfamiliar with was very fun. It was just very silly, and you're seeing like Beethoven coming into the music store and then playing on like a Casio or whatever was just so silly and fun. And I was like, this is cool. And he's just like jamming out on the Casio and there's people watching him. Also, the fact that he gets arrested for being a good musician was so silly. Like everyone else is causing some kind of debauchery or like being disruptive. And to some degree, I can see shitty mall cops having a problem with that. But Beethoven was just putting on a concert. And everyone was like stoked on it. And I guess the music store guy called them because it's like he's causing a scene. It's like, you would love if you had a crowd outside of your store. Shut up. Let him play.
Yeah, for sure.
He's doing a great job.
I also want to talk about how I love that the way that Bill and Ted talks never changes. So like, you know, the way that they talk and the way that they carry themselves, it's supposed to be like Dumb Surfer, you know, we're not supposed to take them seriously. But like, I love that they go that extra mile to make sure that like at the very end, especially, they are the ones that are giving the presentation. And they're like, and this dude, blah, 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 blah. But they're not changing the way that they talk or the way that they speak to be more academic. They're still doing it in their own way. And I love that they didn't have to, in this moment, go back and be very proper in how they talked. And then suddenly they're talking less like Bill and Ted and more like academics or anything like that. They're just kind of like, yeah, and then this dude did this and these dudes were righteous or whatever it is that they're saying. But that wasn't played as a part to like make them seem silly. So they were still allowed to be smart and still be themselves. Yeah. So I really loved that. And I think that there is something to that where it's like, you don't have to be an academic to be smart or to understand things. Or I think much more people, like, it's going to stick more if somebody says like, yo, and then this dude went and did this and it sucked. Or like, you know, just like talking like normal as opposed to being like, and then henceforth, they went and blah, 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 blah.
Yeah,
like
because
that like snootiness, you know, it feels more accessible.
Because there's obviously a level of gatekeeping and sort of like performative classism that comes from performing that kind of rigidity of, I guess, educative speak or whatever, like more what we consider big air quotes professional, which again, professional is such a loaded word in so many ways. Because what the fuck, like, shut up. That means nothing. And it's just a way to gatekeep and keep people out. But you know what I mean? Like by restricting the sort of organic way at which people feel comfortable expressing ideas, you're limiting the ideas themselves because they're not going to be presented or come across in a way that feels natural or real. But then again, there is a level of like cohesion and structure that comes with like spending time formulating said idea, whatever. It's a whole thing. But I do think that a lot of that comes directly from gatekeeping and a complete monopoly of accessibility to not only education, but to wealth.
Yeah, I absolutely think so.
I don't know. That's what it seems like.
Yeah, so
but you're totally right in that last scene, though. It's like they were allowed, and again, this is just echoing what we said earlier about them being authentic in every way. Their kindness, their empathy, all of it is coming across in such an organic, such a very natural way. So seeing them on stage, giving this oral presentation where they're espousing the knowledge that the teacher wanted them to, but in this way that's not necessarily the most eloquent or most expected out of giving a lecture or what would be considered a lecture or teachable dialect or whatever, but they're doing it in their way, and it works just fine, and it's great, and they're not changing to accommodate or adhere to what's expected because they're showing and proving through their knowledge, through their growth, through what they've learned in this process that they know these things, and that's good enough.
And also everybody's really engaged with that. Like through them being able to tell these stories or talk about this and present it using the language that they normally use and just being who they are, it made it more engaging. Also, I think like if I was in that audience, I would never, ever, ever forget that, or anything that they said. So I think that that's also like removes the barrier to entry for that. And yeah, I thought that was really, really cool. I also, okay, so the film was originally supposed to end very differently than how it ended. So that whole ending scene was not supposed to be super big and grand and everything. They were literally just supposed to go back to the same classroom. And just instead of Bill and Ted telling these stories, it was going to be Abraham Lincoln giving his speech and Genghis Khan talking about himself, but it wasn't going to come directly from Bill and Ted. And so it was going to be much more played down. And the finale was going to be prom where the princesses showed up and Rufus. So I'm very glad that they didn't do that because that seems very cheap. And another way to fucking glorify prom, which prom sucked, y'all. Prom is like not great.
Proms, I don't know.
I'm glad that this wasn't a movie that did that. I think that this was a much better ending.
Yeah, because I mean, this ending just added to the frivolity and the bigness and silliness of this. Like, they treated it like an Apple unveiling thing where they come out and they're like, spotlights and who else was in history? Sigmund Freud. And then he comes out and he's like, whoa, I didn't know I had so many issues with my dad or whatever. And then it's just like, it was a boat show. It was a boat show of historic figures. Very big, very silly, and very on brand for the general story. I think you're right. If they had gone back to the classroom, it would have been like, okay, like, oh, that's it. So the princess story that we got for like 10 minutes is more important than the entire narrative arc of them traveling through time to pass this test. Yeah, you're totally right. I'm happy that this is the version instead of that.
And I also think that it was really cool that they didn't lean on a lot of like those weird high school tropes where it's like, because they were going to end at the prom and then they were also going to do that weird thing where they show Bill and Ted like being like the nerds that nobody likes and everybody makes fun of. So they were going to show like the people at their school making fun of them and stuff like that. And I'm glad that like, because this is such a kind movie, I'm glad that they didn't do that. And I think because they chose not to do that, that's part of the reason that Bill and Ted are who they are to a lot of people, because the way that other characters react to characters changes your perception of them too. And I think by not going to like shitty high school tropes and not allowing that to take up that narrative, that just centered the story more on kindness.
Oh, without a doubt. Yeah. Cause I think with the bullying perspective, if you were to treat them less than, other characters were to treat them less than in the story, it takes away from the power that they exude standing away from characters like that. Like, they're not having to compensate or explain why they have this kindness, why they have this, why they are who they are. They just are. And that adds to the, I believe you. Yeah, take me on this journey. Like, I like you. I like these characters. I want to know more.
Can we talk about women?
Yeah, let's do it.
And how they are in this story only to be objectified.
Yes. Do you want to start with the princesses or Joan of Arc?
I kind of want to start with Missy, actually.
Oh, yeah. Okay, so this was such a weird dynamic thing.
So Missy, let's get this straight, is a recent high school graduate who marries Bill's dad. In the next film, she divorces that dad and marries the other dad. And like the whole thing about her is she's just there to be desired, to be objectified, and to be a joke because everybody wants to bone her, right? Like even like Billy the Kid and Socrates, and she's like, oh, history teacher, tell him I said hi, right? And like, to me,
she's not a person.
She's not a person. Also, maybe she has to be of age now because has to be 18 to get married or whatever, right? But like, that also means that these people were lusting after her when she was underage, and it presumes that the history teacher had a relationship with her or a sexual desire for her when she was underage. So I didn't really like that. I didn't appreciate that. Also, like the way that the camera lingers on her and shows the male gaze. And then like even with when Freud is there, like Bill says that he has like an Oedipus complex or whatever because like he wants to bone his mom because he asked her to the prom or whatever. Or I'm sorry, stepmom. But also the whole time it feels like she's just not only there to be looked at, and like the dad bones her in his son's room, right?
So
which
that
is
was
fucking
that
gross.
That was the grossest. Like that was also another moment that felt very out of place. Like the kids leave the room and then he shuts the door, and the implication is that his dad is going to have sex with his stepmom, who is like 2 years older than him.
That felt very alpha
in his
to
son's
me.
room.
Yeah, that felt very alpha to me. Yeah, like in the same way that the other dad is also kind of alpha, but like in like a way that isn't so overt where it's like, you're going to military school. It's like, look, I got the girl that you wanted and now I'm going to bone her in your bed and you're in my house, you know?
Well, what kind of would have been an interesting take if they were to have added the bullies back in here is that these two guys are surrounded by nothing but toxic male existence, toxic masculinity at every point. His dad, who's a fucking cop, who's like this super control freak, who's like, you better do this or this is that and blah, blah, blah. And he's just like a piece of shit. And then this other dad who's like literally like they're in the room, he's staring at her butt while they're talking. I'm just like this like super pervy, objectifying asshole, and also like the fucking her in his son's room, like gross and bad and like what the fuck. It would have been interesting to see because then you're having these three different very specific character groups if there was like a main bully of like these two guys who are just trying to like exist and be good and kind and whatever, confronting all of this toxic masculinity. Because to me, if you had all of those examples, that would make like for a bigger, better story about toxic masculinity being a generalized evil, and that like kindness can overcome certain elements of that. And it would also, to me, give more credence to when they say the F word in that other scene, because then it's out of character, yes, but say the bully called them that in an earlier scene, then it's a callback. Then it's obviously like they're trying to perform this kind of thing that they feel like they should be because every man in their life is that thing. And in this one moment, it feels so wrong, and it intentionally feels wrong because that's not who they are. They're not the person who says that. They're not these bad men in their lives. You know what I mean? That would have been so cool. But even
that's really
still,
interesting.
Even still, I feel like you could still argue that with their dads being pieces of shit. Like they're the main male figures that they have to look to are bad examples of what it is to not just be male or like not even to get into the weird bigendered existence of heteronormativity, but just being a good person. Like they're bad examples of good people. They're not good people, you know?
Well, and then, like, I think that also is a testament to Bill and Ted's character, where they have these fucking horrible monsters of dads, right? And, like, they still, like, they don't subscribe to that. Like, regardless of what happens, they're still who they are, and they are grounded in and take more, and are shaped more by their friendship with one another than they are by their fathers, right? Or by these patriarchal, toxic masculinity people that live at their house. But so I think that's even more a testament to them and who they really are, and also the importance of friendship, especially when you come from a household like that. And I think that also is part of the reason why they are so close, is because they had to be in order to survive, in order to be who they are, because they are not safe at home, right? They are not like, they only truly have each other. And so they've always had to connect on this deeper level, where Ted, you know, we see his dad is talking to him with a gun on his side, telling him, you're going to go to military school, boy. I don't care what you do. You're going to fucking go because you failed. And he's like, but I didn't fail at that. And he's like, yes, you did. Right. So you can only imagine like the type of abuse that he himself has dealt with. Right. And who was there to keep him safe? Clearly not mom. Clearly not, you know, he probably drove mom away. Right. So like it was always Bill. It was always that. And so when you share that kind of deep trauma or those types of experiences with other people that you're really close to, it does make you very close.
That's a really good point. That makes sense. That kind of validates some other things, but it's absolutely true. Analyzing these two parents is just, I mean, it makes sense why they are who they are.
I want to go back to Missy just for a minute, because I feel like throughout all of the movies, especially this one, she's just, because she's still a young woman, she's like 18, right? 18 or 19. I think she's 18. But like, she doesn't yet know what to do or how to be who she is, or like how to exist as a woman, as a wife, as now a mother of somebody that is like 2 years younger than her. So like she's just going through the motions of what she thinks a mom is supposed to do. So she's like gardening, or she's, I'll give you a ride, sweetheart, and makes him call her mom, you know, to try to, I think that's also trying to make her feel like she's older, right? Like she is a woman now. And then doing things like, do you guys want some sandwiches? Do you want this? You need to do your chores. So like she's like a copy of like the mother from Freaky Friday or something that is just kind of like doing all of this, you know?
Well, I also like to add on to that. I feel like she's trying to perform something that's expected of her. So in this case, it's motherhood. Yeah. It's accepting that role. So she's performing motherhood. But I'm assuming that's influenced by the way his dad uses language and sees her. So I'm sure, and this very clearly is predatory language, but I'm sure he's told her on many occasions that she has an old soul, right? Mm-hmm. So language that is imbuing the young partner to feel older than they are, or to justify the sort of predatory behavior of the dad in this way. And because of that, internalizing that, I mean, like, I have an older, I wish I wasn't my age. Like, I'm older. I'm going to do this. And like going into the role of performing motherhood. It feels just, it feels like manipulative fodder and predatory behavior. And unfortunately, it sucks because she is seen nothing as just a token sexual object. But outside of that, like, I just feel bad for her.
In every movie. And that's even
even the new one. Yeah.
Even in the new one, we start with Missy as like the callback and like, haha, remember that. And so like literally throughout this entire story, like she is just, the joke is she has a new husband every time, and it's going to be the dad of this person or the dad of this person or now his son. And so it's just really weird and gross. And I think Missy deserved a lot better. Just like Joan of Arc.
Are we on a city tour of a major city on those bipedal scooters? Because that was a segue. It was.
All right. So, Joan of Arc.
Let me just run that into the ground real quick. I'm so sorry.
So, we start with Joan of Arc. And Ted is asked, like, who is Joan of Arc? And he's like, Noah's wife. And I was like, okay, like, cool. Then we get Joan of Arc, and I'm like, all right, cool, right? We're doing so much work on Napoleon and on Socrates and on Billy the Kid. Then her whole thing is everybody else in this gets a moment to shine or a moment to be who they are, right? And in the mall specifically, everybody is like going to what they are known for, right? Or what makes sense with them as this historical figure. And Joan of Arc gets to go do jazzercise. Like, that is what she goes to. She goes, like, by the time she was 17, she did so fucking much. And instead of focusing on any of those things, we're just going to focus on the fact that she's the token woman in this group and not spend any time on her at all, but just be like, oh, look, she's in a jazzercise thing. And now she, like, pushed the other woman out, which I don't think she would, just to like dance on stage herself. Like that whole thing felt out of character, and it felt very gross, and it felt very very infuriating.
It was gross because it's very much a male perspective of being like, oh, well, she's just a girl, so let her go do girl stuff. Like, yeah, sure, she did all this stuff in her historical past, but she didn't just have time to be a girl. And it's like, shut the fuck up. Like, sure, but it's just such a weak, not just understanding, but it's just like, it's silly. Because in these moments where all these other figures are playing with, like you were saying, the thing that they were known for to some capacity. So like Genghis Khan was violent. Beethoven is a musician. You're seeing these people playing with the thing that they're known for within the mall. What is she known for? She's known for intelligence, conquering, leadership,
fighting.
Okay, she's gonna lead a feminine jazzercise mall. Like, stop it. Like, get out of here. Look, easy. Let's workshop it. What else could she have done? Because technically she is young, she could have gone to an area that was like a kiddie area, but by the end of it, she's like leading them in a protest or something. Or like she builds a big ship with them. And then they're all just like, yeah. And then maybe a kid goes to his parents and being like, I won't stand for that or something. And they're like, oh no. You know what I mean? So easy. It's so easy to hit a couple different ideas instead of takes place in a jazzercise and enjoy. Like, no.
But they really,
bad.
Instead of getting on that, they decided that they were going to focus on Socrates and Billy the Kid trying to pick up on these girls, and then having Freud come over with his fucking corn dog, and it's up when he goes to talk to them, and he's like, "Hey, ladies, blah blah blah," and they're like, "You're weird," and then he holds it down, symbolic of his dick.
Yeah, it's such boring gags, like. Such boring, and like, these are the moments that like, oh, it was written in 4 days. Yeah, it was written in 4 days. Like these guys are like, what's a funny joke? I don't know. Yeah, they're in a corn. What's in a mall? Corn dog. Great. And then they go to the girl and she's like, I won't have sex with you. And then he drops the corn dog because his dick fell off. Like, okay, let's punch that up. No, like you guys. Yeah. Okay, that's fine. That's fine. I guess we're just gonna go with that idea.
There was this wild thing that I read online from a Wired article.
A wild stallion.
It was talking about how this movie, like viewing it now, is kind of about the internet and about how like looking at it through that lens of like the telephone booth like is, you know, and they're going through all these wires and time and all that stuff, and they're finding information on historical figures or on this, and they're able to lead their own informative historical journey or whatever, right? Which I think is fucking great. And then you can get like, there's so many like little theories that you can go down into where it's like, and then Keanu Reeves becomes Neo and he uses the telephone again to go in and out of these worlds. And so it's foreshadowing who he becomes in. And like, I am so here for all of that because it's just so fun. But, yeah, I really liked, thinking about this as a precursor to, cause like the internet was around, but it wasn't, you know, widely available. Certainly, high school kids didn't have access and stuff like that. But I like this as like a precursor to that. I thought that was kind of fun.
Cut to somebody sifting through the Wachowski sisters' notes. On the last page, it says Bill and Ted, but green. That's their pitch for The Matrix. Bill and Ted, but just green all the time. Which is, I mean... The Matrix is fantastic. Yeah. It's a great movie, but you're totally right. What an interesting. I didn't read that, but now that you say that, it's very clearly. It's like those early '90s excerpts of like surfing the web, or like mid '90s rather. Like we're surfing the web, and it's like, whoa, we're going to another website. Oh my god, or whatever.
Oh, that's another thing. It was originally the time traveling booth was supposed to be like 1968 van, and then they were like, oh, Back to the Future came out, so everybody's gonna say that we ripped them off. Let's do a phone booth, not realizing that Doctor Who was a thing, and so they like. I thought that was pretty funny too. Yeah. The last thing I want to talk about is the princesses real quick. quick, because they're barely in the movie. We see them for 5 minutes and they're like, oh, we're supposed to marry these bad guys. And then they're like, dudes, we'll save you, right? And then they don't save them, but Rufus goes back and saves them, and they're kind of like a trophy at the end, so it's like,
yeah, here's your prize.
Yeah, so it's like, oh, here you go. And then the really shitty, Rufus showed us this thing called the mall and these things called credit cards. And I was like,
It's going to be a big gag from me.
I did like that they played instruments. So the chick picked up the drumsticks and I was like, fucking hell yeah, I'm here for this. Right? Because they were part of the band. But other than that, yeah, I thought that whole thing was weird and gross. And the princesses are never played by the same two actors in any of the films. So it's two different actors for the first one, two different actors for the second one, and two different actors for the last one, who are also younger than they're supposed to be. So there's a lot of issues with that. But I don't understand how, out of everybody, they are the actors that could not come back or are so easily replaceable. I thought that was super shitty.
It was shitty, but it to me, I guess because of the way women are treated generally in this movie, it's just very they the story doesn't care about the princesses. They're really just there to be prizes and a subplot, some sort of romantic subplot, since Bill and Ted are straight in this world or not romantic with each other. So I gotta have some romance because whatever. And it's just, let's throw these girls in there, and then they're in there for maybe 4 minutes of screen time, and then they're out. Get them out. It's just, ugh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They were, another little bit of trivia. So there were some other historical figures that were in the running for being in this movie. One of them was Amelia Earhart, who I would have loved to see. I think that would have been so great. Another one was Babe Ruth. Also, so Napoleon was originally going to be Hitler, and then they were like, we can't make this is not going to be good if we have a cute, fun, lovable Hitler, but we need to change that. So at least they had the foresight for that. But
that would be a very different movie.
Yeah.
Yikes.
But Amelia Earhart would have been so sweet, I think.
That would have been very sweet. I agree. I do like my favorite line was "Strange things are afoot at the Circle K." It's so quintessential Keanu, just strange things are afoot at the Circle K. Or it's just so he throws his wig 15 times, cocking his neck to the left and to the right and to the right. It's doing a PlayStation 2 Tekken cheat code with his neck. Strange things are afoot. It's just, it's so wacky, and it was very good, and I love that line very much. We begin our most excellent sequel in 2020 San Dimas, California, where our dudes Bill S. Preston Esquire and Ted Theodore Logan find themselves at a creative, romantic, and autonomous impasse. Despite their best efforts, they still haven't written the song that unites the world and have become a joke in the process. Just when they're about to give up, Kelly, Rufus's daughter, shows up and informs them that if they don't write the song by 7:17 p.m. that evening, the world and time as we know it will end. Desperate, Bill and Ted attempt to go to the future and steal the song from their future selves, but by doing so end up sending their future selves down a violent and crime-filled path.
Meanwhile, Billy and Thea, their daughters, have their own journey through time, collecting the world's best musicians to create a band to help their dads write the song that saves the world. Oops, they got killed and are in hell now. Whoops, so are Bill and Ted. Then they find death and get the band back together to head up to the surface, where it turns out the prophecy was about Billy and Thea all along. They compose music, and it's excellent.
Excellent, dudes.
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 I, right off the bat, was completely in love with Billy and Thea. And I think that they did such a great job. I watched during the Comic-Con stay at home, I watched a panel with them and Keanu and Winters, and they were talking about how both of those actors had not watched Bill and Ted and did not know anything about it. And then when they got callbacks for it and everything, oh my God. And then they like sat down and watched it and they were like, holy shit. And they did both of them did a lot of work on the mannerisms and like facial expressions and all of that. So like you see Billy kind of like move around and like do the thing. And it's very cute. Also very cute that they named their daughters after each other. I really, really, really thought that was very sweet.
Billy is Ted's daughter and Thea is Bill's daughter.
Yeah, I thought that was just so cute. And that, like, just the way that they inhabited those characters was just like, they also were just incredibly kind people. And they were truly, like, when their dads were all washed up and, like, nobody wanted to listen to them, they were like, yeah, dude, this sounded really great. You know, like, they were also very yes and without, like, putting them down, you know. And even when like they're talking to people and they're like Death is like, but what about this? They're like, oh, you know what, that wasn't great, but this other thing that you did was really great, you know. So they're just they really inhabit that kindness, and they are also allowed to be who they are. They're allowed to be themselves. And so yes, they are Bill and Ted's daughters, but they are Billy and Thea. They are not Bill and Ted.
Yeah, but like you were saying, just like the fact that they inhabit the same characteristics that their dads have, and there's not only just like mannerisms, but in the yes and the adventure and the kindness and the empathy and the obvious love for one another and just like everything about them. They were just great. They did such a good job. I liked their story a lot because, I mean, so Bill and Ted are having their whole like losing their relationships and trying to find the song, and they're jumping back in time. So they're trying to do this like they're just playing like time tag with their future and past selves, and also the future and past versions of their wives, which is fun because it's not the same story as we've seen before with Bill and Ted. However, Billy and Thea are echoing essentially the first movie, but on their own journey. So instead of collecting historical figures of note for their presentation, they're collecting historical musicians of the past to create a band. But it's very similar in a fun way that it's just like we're seeing another version of the exact same story play out as the B plot to Bill and Ted's kind of existential crises. And even in that process, it's so good because like we're getting this a whole other shade. Like if you loved the first one, their subplot is the best because you're getting fun play with new historical figures, musicians, and all of these new characters and stuff, and implementing them and also interweaving them with each other when they all end up in hell and they meet Death, but Bill and Ted get back with Death and they start the band together. Because that actor he is fucking great, the guy who plays Death, because he's the cop in Roswell. He's also been like he's been in just a ton of stuff, but he's a fantastic actor, and the character of Death is very fun and funny and silly because he's like Death, but he's also like kind of cowardly but charming and cute and kind of sweet but also very severe at times, and it's just like so atypical of what you would assume Death to be, and I love that. Yeah. It's just a very good character.
Yeah, and Billy and Thea, they're not trying to change the world. They're not trying to, like, they're really just wanting to help their dads, you know? And they're like, you know, because they believe in them, right? And they're just like, yeah, you know, I'm going to do it. I have the means to do this. I'm going to help them out. This is going to be awesome, you know? And like the reason that they're collecting these is to like, you know, is to help their dad. But it's also like they're collecting these excellent musicians. See what I did there? Out of this wonderful amount of like love and respect. And like, you know, there's this line that Grandpa uses to them where he's like, you guys are 24 and you don't have a job. You just stay in the house and you listen to music. What do you think? And it's like, okay, look, everybody that's 24 still lives with their parents because we can't afford to live on our own. Thanks for being an asshole, you know? Yeah. But like, I love that they're just super content with that they're just like, yeah, it's awesome. I do this. I listen to a lot of music. I know a lot of stuff, you know, and because they've developed that ear, they were able to really pick some of the best, even not just from like, you know, rock and roll or like modern music, like going all the way back to Linglin, like going back and like getting her and all this stuff. And it was also really lovely because rather than just having like these wild like leaders, it was these musicians that were inspired by each other. So like the moment when they see Jimi Hendrix, right? And he's like, yeah, whatever. But then they bring Louis Armstrong in and he's like, oh, hey, you know, and then they go and meet Bach, and then like seeing Bach meet her, and then just like the way that they're all in awe of each other and that respect that they have for one another. And they're also like just so like, you know, Jimmy and Louis get it right off the bat where they're like, oh, time travel. All right, cool. So they don't do that thing that movies do so often where they like downplay them or play them like they're not going to get this, right? And Kid Cudi is like the one that's like, oh yeah, and then the singularity and you do the thing and you do the thing and blah, 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 blah. And I love that like it treated all of these characters like they're smart and like they're intelligent and like they're going to still have that yes and like, you know, a lot of that also comes from the honesty of Billy and Thea, where they're just like, hey, yo, this is what's going on, you know, let's go save the world, you know. And it turns out, I love that what they did with this is they made all of the dudes like Rufus and Bill and like the future, they all thought that it was Bill and Ted that were the people that unite the world or whatever, right? But not realizing that it's actually Billy and Thea. Like the moment, and this like is going back to Bill and Ted from like what we're saying with the last one, where when they're presented with new information, they're like, oh yeah, cool. You know, like I feel like a lot of other characters in that moment would have like where they realize that it's not about them, it's about somebody else. They would be just really shitty or really sad or really whatever. But like, you know, because they spent their entire lives trying to write this one fucking song and couldn't do it. And then just all of a sudden like, oh, dude, it's you guys. Oh yeah, here, you go, you do this. Like we're here for you, you know? And I thought that was a really beautiful moment. And there's like so many moments where Bill and Ted are willing to sacrifice this song or willing to sacrifice all of time and space for their wives or for their children, playing up their importance because, you know, they were kind of their wives or girlfriends, you know, were always just such a side plot to where they're willing to give up the entire universe just to be with them and just to save them.
Yeah, and I think just re-amplifying that specifically with the princesses when they're at the counseling, and it's essentially like they cannot exist without one another, and so they constantly are like we believe this, we love you, and we also love you. And the counselor is essentially saying like, if you don't change, this could end. And then they're told that like their marriages could end. So when they leave, and then at a certain point, they time travel back to that moment to come in and say like, we're going to be better. We're sorry. Like we thought about it. We listened. We heard you. And you're right. Everything you said was right. We're going to be better and we're going to change and we're going to be better for you because we don't want to ruin this from us being selfish. I was like, yeah, it's just, that's very Bill and Ted. Like, again, they listen, they're kind, they're considerate.
And they also, there was that moment where they were like, you guys from the future are going to come back and you guys are going to try to take you on a adventure and you're not going to be happy with us. Like, you know, and, you know, so don't go because you don't need to see that. And then like, they were like, no, go see this for yourself, you know that this is not who we are going to be. We are going to change. But they're, rather than trying to like, they stopped themselves from being like, no. And they were like, no, you make your own decision. You do what you got to, but this is what we are going to do, like moving forward.
Yeah, which I loved. I love that kind of strength because that's not easy, but it's also the right thing to do and the kind thing. It's the thing. It's considerate. It's honest. It's like, yeah, if I've been bad, I'm not going to restrict you from learning something new and making a choice for yourself. If I'm not right, that's okay. As hard as that is, that's okay. But that's a choice for you to make, not for me to control. I'm not here to control the image of myself. What I've done is what I've done, and that's who I am. And if you decide for yourself it doesn't work, then so be it. But what a good thing. Like, you know, it's just so it's good.
Yeah, I really liked the treatment of women a lot better in this than the last couple because they actually got to be a part of the story, and you know, they were always a part of this story but never really got their spot or got their moment. And so like they were more fleshed out, especially Billy and Thea. I still think that the princesses didn't have a lot going on.
No.
But I still thought that it was sweet. I thought it was cool. And then I thought it was also cool that, like, I think there's like a line where they're like, the kids are the ones that have to like clean up after the older generation. And that's true for both the future and for the present, right? Because the adults that are making decisions aren't thinking about anybody else, even though they're saying that they are. And so they're the ones that, like, the only reason that everything is saved is because Kelly went back to save Bill and Ted. Billy and Thea went and took the time machine. They are the reason why everything is okay.
Yeah, and I mean, even in the story itself, like, Bill and Ted were blind to the idea that maybe it wasn't them who saved the world. Maybe it was these other people. So it's really, it is them having to clean up not only the present, but the future, and having to fix the mistakes of the past, whether that's like time-wise or just generationally.
Yeah, and like this whole movie is basically about like father-daughter relationships,
which was great. I really enjoyed like just watching them interact and talk about music was really sweet. Like that scene I loved, where their song at the wedding was obviously trash and terrible, but their daughters are just like, honestly, your theremin playing was like so sick. And then the other daughter's like, yeah. And then when you did this, it reminded me of this very specific person who's really good at that instrument. And you rivaled that person's skill. Like, you were so good. Like, even though the song itself wasn't great, they're still like we've been saying, yes-anding in a very positive way, in a very reassuring way. Because Bill and Ted know it sucked. Like, you don't have to just like rub it in. We all know that it was bad. They're trying to see the good in it, and that goodness, that kindness is so sweet because, again, it's just this echo chamber of kind characters. The daughters are perfect reflections of their fathers, and in this moment, it's just like this kind fest. I loved seeing it. I loved seeing them interact. It was just so sweet.
Kind Fest 2020.
Kind Fest 2020. I'm super into talking about that robot because I didn't realize who the robot was, the actor, and I think he's a fantastic actor.
Who is it? I didn't.
His name's Anthony Carrigan. So did you ever watch Barry on HBO? So it's like Henry Winkler and Bill Hader.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So he's the lead, but this guy Anthony Carrigan plays like the third lead in the show, and I've never seen him in anything else, and he is an absolute standout. He's so funny. His character is so specific and so emotionally nuanced, but like the perfect character in that show. And so in this movie, when the character starts gaining sentience and like with the sentience is immediately nervous and self-deprecating and kind of like sad and unsure, like all of those things, I was like, this is a really fun character. Like, I like the character choice, and I was like, this is really well acted. And then I was like, oh, of course it's that guy. That guy's so good. He's so good at playing like kind of sad, fun, optimistic, but at the same time very downtrodden characters. It was great. Yeah, I like him.
It's weird because my interpretation of that character was that he's like the shitty person that does something bad just because he's told to, and then centers himself in the apology. So by centering themselves all the time, and by like being like, I'm so sorry, I'm Dennis, I am this, like he's like not actually saying sorry and not actually like he's just trying to admit himself of guilt.
Well, no, because he was absolutely 100%, but I think that was like part of the intention, because he's ignored the entire time. Like, even when they're walking up the stairs, he's like, well, I'm Dennis. They're like, okay, great. Yep. And he's like, but I'm Dennis McCoy. They're like, yep, your name is Dennis whatever McCoy, and you're this, and cool, we're gonna move on. Are you done? Like, the only time I've ever really seen either Bill or Ted frustrated or even kind of sarcastic is when they're interacting with this bad character, for the reasons that you've explained. Just, this is a murderous character who then, instead of atoning or apologizing or trying to be better, victimizes themselves to center the story and center the conversation around themselves. But I liked seeing the appropriate reactions of characters who we thus far only see as kind, empathetic, lovely, sweet, to then get slightly frustrated in a way that feels unfamiliar with this obviously bad character reacting in a way that feels appropriate.
Yeah, I thought that was really, really good and really appropriate. Because I think if they were just kind of like, because they did do the normal like, okay, well, we're moving on, right? And then this person, like this robot that does not want to move away from this because he's still centering himself because, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. So to see them get frustrated and be like, okay, in still a very kind way, like it was brilliant. Yeah.
Also kind for the fact that he just killed them and their daughters.
Fucking right.
You know what I mean? Because then even later when they get in the SWAT car to return to the surface because death is bringing them back, they intentionally try to leave him behind. Like they absolutely ditch him in hell. And then he just hear a bang on the door and they're like, oh no. And he opens, he's like, oh, I must have gotten behind there for a sec. I'm going to just get in here now. And they're like, cool. Yep.
Okay.
Got it. Yep.
I'm Dennis.
Understood. I'm Dennis. Like, yep. Yes, he is. Yep. That's right.
And that is the correct response, right? Is to not engage and to just be like, yes, you are. And like, like, just be like, okay, cool.
Yeah. So that to me, like I liked his character. Just the acting choices themselves were just like so desperate and kind of sad that I really enjoyed. But within the story, I was like, oh yeah, like these people are reacting to this bad person the right way, which I liked and appreciated.
I did too. I thought that was really great. I thought it was really great that even though Ted's dad didn't necessarily, like, he should have believed his son and all this other stuff, I liked that we got that closure where he's like, oh my gosh, you were right. I messed up. I should have believed you this whole time. I'm really sorry. Like, we got that, like, kind of like heartfelt apology, and I thought that was a really nice touch because it wasn't like a big giant moment, but it was enough to know like there's a lot of weight that is behind this moment. And like, I felt like what he said was perfect, was great. And then he moved on, right? The story moved on, unlike Dennis again, who's just like, you guys,
yeah.
I'm so
pay attention to me.
So like the difference in those apologies.
Relatively, I know that the moment with his dad was like supposed to be heartfelt, but I still hate his dad. I still think his dad's a piece of shit.
His dad sucks still.
So after all of that like toxicness and like this entire life, it's just like, now I believe you because I had to experience myself, like, or you can just listen to your fucking kid, you absolute trash can, instead of wasting 50 years of your life because you're a stubborn fucking toxic dude. Like, I still think his dad sucks. So like, even though they've mended their friendship in this story, I was just like, yeah, whatever. Great. You got your emotional arc. We're done. Like, I don't need any more from you.
Exactly. And that's why I liked that it was just like, it was a minute of screen time and it wasn't like the big, I also liked that wasn't the end. Like, son, I'm so sorry, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. I liked that it was just like a little thing that was slipped in there and that wasn't drawn out and that they didn't make it into like a bigger thing that it was. It was just there. It happened. It was done.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. I hated him, but I like that. I also loved the product placement in this film
for Guitar Center.
Well, that very big glaring obvious, like, oh no. But like, I think there was like a very clear Pepsi one. There was another one that I don't quite remember, but it was like when they're all piled up on the freeway, the only two visible signs that you can see are a Pepsi truck and a Guitar Center truck. And they're like, we're stuck on this freeway. How are we ever going to create the song that saves the world? Wait, look, they've got instruments. And then they just like raid the Guitar Center truck and set up a whole like stage because it's probably got lights too. And it's just like, way to go, Guitar Center. Cool. Which, whatever. I think their budget for such a big movie was really small generally. So I'm not like surprised. I'm sure Guitar Center probably gave him like a couple million for that kind of advertising. Yeah, Guitar Center saved the world. I don't know. It was cute.
Not with their prices.
No. I the ending I thought it was cool. It was fun. I like that the princesses decided to be with them because they like went to every other version of time in history and met every other version of Bill and Ted. And they're like, no, this is the right one. You're the right ones. We want to be here with you. And again, it was like letting them go and decide for themselves. Like,
Yeah.
You know? Yeah, I thought that was it was just very good. And that being like one of the moments at the end when they like come back and they're setting up the music and stuff. And it's like, we want to stay here. It's like, oh, yay.
Yeah. And it was their choice too, because, you know, I think that was incredibly important. And again, that they didn't try to manipulate. They were just like, this is what we've seen. You go figure it out for yourself. And then we'll come back, you know?
Yeah.
I thought that the solution was really good. I thought it was really great that Bill and Ted like finally were able to admit they didn't have the song, they didn't know what to do, and their kids stepped up to the plate rather than be like, I mean, there was like a moment where they're like, wait, but I just listen to music. And they're like, yeah, dude, but you know how to put it together. You know, you do this.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh yeah, all right, cool. So they just went up and they fucking did it without even thinking about it, without like, you know, they were just so intelligent and so smart in the way that they put everything together. And I loved seeing them just be like, yeah, all right, we're going to go. We're going to fucking do this. We're going to own it. And they did a great job.
100%. They never waited for somebody to tell them what to do or how to do it. They just decided to try something and went with it and went and did it. They're like, we can help our dads by getting a band together. How do we get a band? Oh, let's time travel. Like, let's go get the best, whatever. And then even them setting up the stage at the end, they're setting up the instruments and everything just because they're running out of time. They don't know that they're in charge of the music. They don't know they're the ones to write the song. They're just doing it because on their own volition, they want to make sure things get done, and they're not waiting for anybody to tell them what to do or how to do it.
I want to talk about how Bill and Ted let this idea or this prophecy kind of rule their lives to the point to where they're unable to do anything else. I mean, if somebody tells you that your song is going to unite the entire world, like, you're not going to be able to do anything but that. But by taking that so seriously too, like, that takes away creativity, because then there's this like huge amount of pressure. And then, you know, I'm sure that they're feeling a lot of like imposter syndrome and all of this, you know, and it's like the harder that they try, the further away they get from uniting everybody. And in fact, everybody just kind of turns on them. So I thought that was a really smart choice.
Yeah,
in like what
so.
it's saying about like creativity. Yeah,
I agree. I think I also thought that was cool. I think I was trailing off. I don't know how to articulate this, because I go back and forth on this idea. So initially, when watching this, I was hoping that they would have addressed in some form or another, like, the use of the F word in the first two. Because I thought what would have been cute is put a little hat on it and like correct it in this one. Because it's obviously what's done is done. It's happened. Like, it's a thing. But I was hoping that would have been there. But then at the same time, I'm like, is putting a hat on it calling attention to it and thereby giving it more of a shout out? And at that point, is that doing more damage than it's doing good? So I'm not sure. But sorry, I was in another world thinking about that, going back and forth in my head about yes or no on that. I haven't decided either way.
No, I hear what you're saying about like, would it have been better for them to address that? I don't know what the answer is.
Yeah.
But
me neither.
But I do see what you're saying. And yeah, would it be more harmful to call it out, or would it be more restorative? I don't know.
Yeah, that's the thing, is it's like I was hoping to see something like that, but because I didn't get it, am I wishing that it was there just because I had anticipated something like that, even if it was not necessarily the right thing to do? Or like, I just don't know. But again, it's not like, I guess it's only impacting me in this way just because I'm like, it was unexpected, and I'm like, also that word is just like bad in general.
Right.
But I don't know, and therefore cannot answer that. Anyways,
more contemplation necessary.
I guess so. I'm so goofy. Dave Grohl's cameo was silly.
That whole thing. Okay, so I wrote down specifically like the amount of times that they go back to like try to find themselves, right? So, or like steal the song from them, right? And how things get worse and worse and worse. So like the first one was when they were trying to steal from themselves, right? And they're just like, they didn't write the song or whatever, and they're like blaming them for stuff. And so they're blaming themselves in the past, which is something that they continue to do. So like then the second time they're trying to sabotage themselves with like, you know, your wives weren't happy and they left you, and super being assholes about it, right? And then the next time they're like, you know, they have their silly ass English accents and like,
oh
so
my gosh.
And they're like, oh, I like this me, you know. And I think that is the real turning point for them, because that's when they were breaking and entering to try to impress themselves, right?
Yeah.
And then they also decided that they were going to steal a song from Dave Grohl and then also pull a gun on themselves, you know, because it's so like the desperation that, like, you know, they became alcoholics, then they turned to this, then they turned to this, and they're blaming Bill and Ted, like, you know, their past selves, for losing their wives and for their kids not being able to talk to them and everything. And so because they can't blame, they're unable to reconcile the fact that it is them at this present time that is doing that. So they have to go back to like, oh, well, these are the people. I am not that same person.
Yeah.
So I thought that was super interesting. And then it like goes to like them in prison. And then it goes to like finally to them on their deathbeds, essentially. And they're sitting there, and the conversations that they have with each other, I thought were really interesting, because like Bill is looking at himself like as an older man and saying, thank you for always being here for me, you know, like, and in this moment of like self-kindness and like awareness of like, you know, I could always count on you, like talking to himself. And I thought that was fucking awesome. And then Ted looks at himself and he is like, I feel like I don't know you because I never opened up to you, you know, so he's never allowed himself to like really dig deep and to see what's in there and to like know himself. And a lot of that probably because of the trauma that he experienced as a young man from his father, you know. So that was like a surprisingly deep moment that like I remember having to pause and being like, wow, that was fucking good.
Yeah. Well, those scenes specifically, like just on this existential journey that they are experiencing, I thought just the setup of that, like the conversation with their bigger, like their bad selves, of them blaming these other versions of themselves and not being able to accept the fact that it is them in this timeline doing this bad thing, as a way to sort of acknowledge their own personal struggle, Bill and Ted in the current reality, with this idea of inauthenticity or trying to be somebody that they're not. And to me, that echoed back to those small moments of like inauthenticity in the first one, where like, yeah, it's very clear that they did something that was maybe uncomfortable or whatever. And so we're seeing that kind of actualized in these bad versions of themselves. And then even at the end, just thanking themselves for the kindness that they gave to themselves and the opportunity to not only be good, but to be good to each other, I guess. It was like somebody just took the phrase be excellent to each other and then created a scene around the idea of being excellent to yourself. You know?
Yeah. Oh, I love that.
It was like he was just saying, thank you for allowing the space for me to be excellent to myself and to give myself the love that maybe I didn't have elsewhere, or maybe at one point I didn't have for myself, but I allowed myself the space to grow and to cultivate that kind of love and goodness. And thank you. Just like that. Yeah, it was very sweet. It was very good. That was a really good scene.
Yeah, because I feel like at that moment they were able to like really appreciate them and appreciate them for being who they are, you know, because self-love, like as many Instagram stories or whatever talk about it, right? It's really hard to practice, and it's really hard to trust yourself, and it's really hard to like be kind to yourself. Like I'm always trying to think about like, what the fuck have I done that's like nice? You know, like I try to be nice to everybody else, but my inner monologue is so fucked up, you know, or something like that. And so it's like seeing them acknowledge that and be like, that's cool, you know, and also seeing that you can hide from yourself, you know, and like acknowledge that like, I don't even know you. I don't know who I am because I never allowed myself to open up to not even anybody, but even to myself, you know? So
Yeah.
And the difference between those two characters, and again, like looking at their fathers or looking at like where they grew up and all of that, like how even like, because they've obviously had like lived a good life together. They have the best friend, they have the wife, you know, who's presumably also awesome, and great daughters and all this. But like you can have all of that and you can still not be completely true to yourself, or you can still be hiding different parts of yourself from you.
Yeah.
Because, you know, it can be really terrifying, especially when there is some sort of trauma. The more that I think about that, the more impressed I am with that conversation, I think.
Well, also just having that little moment of seeing the princesses in their old age running outside into the phone booth and like leaving, which essentially instigates the entirety of that existential crises storyline. But then in this space, they don't see the princesses, so it's assumed that they maybe don't have them, or I guess they see them in pictures. Yeah, I don't know. I forget if like they know that the princesses are there, but knowing that the princesses were there and they've lived this long, lovely life together, and even at the end of the day, they all still work as a team in order to make sure that they go on this journey. At the end of their life, the princesses have to go to the therapy session in this day for them to look, you know, that like that whole thing. So it's understood to get to where they need to be, they have to work together in this way. And also the princesses are sick. Because if that's like at the end of their age and they're the ones being like, you have to go on this journey, we know that we have to be a part of it. Cool. We're going to scoot and we'll see you in the past. And also we'll see you at these other places and we'll be back. Cool. Thank you. You're like, yay. Yeah. People, that's good.
Yeah.
Good.
I think that this movie was just overall really great and really pleasant here in 2020. Yeah. It was a really great escape. And by the end, when they're like playing that song and everything, I was like crying and I'm like, yeah, we're all in this together. And this is about everybody and we're going to win. And it doesn't matter how bad, like, you know, and it was a much needed breath of fresh air and like cute little moment of like hope and remembrance of like just like friendship and kindness. And this is the movie that 2020 needed. It's not like super deep. It's not all this other stuff, but it was a delight.
It's a delight. It's a nice, fun movie just to experience. It's not, wow, what filmmaking and what storytelling and what, like it's the everything about it's fair and fine and good, but it is really, it feels like a momentary palate cleanser for the current reality. So it was a nice escape and it was a nice movie. All the new characters were great. All of the old characters were great, except their dads. Their dads suck. But it was really just the one dad. Oh, and then the little brother who is now dating Missy, but that was the whole thing. And like,
married. Sorry, she's married again. We like, ugh. And she's still the butt of the joke. Like, yeah. She's one of the things that I was like, okay, you had a chance to write this. And I feel like a lot of the things that I thought could have been improved were improved. You know, there were more people of color in this rather than just centering a lot of old white dudes, right? I feel like there was a little bit more representation at least.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I think that's all I really had to say about this. They were delightful. It was great to revisit these characters. It was great to see them be old and still be those people that were just so quick to change their opinion when presented with new information. Yeah,
which they maintain that characteristic. That was nice. Because I mean, oftentimes there is an expectation that like as you age, the more conservative or rooted in your belief system you are, but it's nice to know that these characters who we've known as being contemplative, being open, being good in these ways, maintain those characteristics about themselves. It was just nice. And that them being rigid wasn't a part of the story.
Also, it was young women that saved the day, and they saved the day by being rebellious and by taking initiative and by just trying to be good people and be helpful. And were still able to hold their own and not just be, you know, shadows of their fathers or, you know, they were full characters, which is great. Women save the world. Young women save the world, everybody.
Young women save the world. This is the conclusion of our
where
podcast.
we say our feelings about these movies.
Yes.
In conclusion, Eric Lefebvre,
Yeah.
what did you think of the original Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure? Who did you think it was for? Sorry.
I think it was, I mean, it's just going to be a very general teenagers. I think I'm going to be very pragmatic and just say what I actually think and not make a joke because I'm not funny today. No, it is for teenagers. It was very takes place at the mall and the water park. And it's like, oh man, class sucks. I hate history. JK, let's go in history. What? Shakespeare was the first rapper. Can you believe it? It was like that kind of tone the whole time. So to me, I was like, oh, this is perfect for teenagers. It's like, I hate school. I want to surf or whatever and music, all that. Yes, teenagers. Who do you think it was for?
I hella think that it was also for teenagers because it was super empowering in the way that they were able to talk about history and be like, yo, and then this dude was super tight. So I think it was a kind of an empowering thing. You can be whoever you are and it is super fine. All you gotta do is be excellent, dude. I don't know.
Yeah.
I love this movie.
They were cool. It was honestly, it was just a glorified Circle K commercial.
Oh, hell yeah. When they're asking people for history facts outside of the Circle K, I was like, fuck yeah.
It's so funny.
Did you like it, Eric?
I did like it. To me, it's not a full-blown love, but I did like it. I'd never seen it before yesterday. I enjoyed myself. I thought it was very fun. I liked it. Did you like it?
I love this movie. I had a great time. If I need a feel-good movie, it'll be Karate Kid and this,
Ooh, yeah, that's a good pairing.
It was so good. And even though overlooking the treatment of women and all the other things that we talked about it, I just love a good friendship movie. I love seeing people be so kind to each other and be so yes and I'm this is the friend that I always wanted, especially when I was in high school going through all this shit. I want this to exist, or this type of connection to exist. And I'm just happy that I got to witness it. Just them when they smile at each other, it's just so cute. Just being just so sweet to each other. Just yeah, and also seeing two dudes be able to do that together too was just super great, yeah, I loved it. What did you think of the new one of Face the Music? Is this new or interesting or the same, progressive, regressive? Has it evolved with today's ideas?
I thought it was new and interesting, relatively speaking, because for the most part, it's the same story. But I liked the inclusion of the daughters. I liked the sort of self-reflective existentialism. I thought it was great. I thought it was new and interesting. And I thought it was, I wouldn't necessarily say progressive because I don't think that the last one was necessarily regressive. Maybe just in its portrayals of women, it did a better job.
Yeah, I think it was both new and interesting and the same. And so it's weird to inhabit all of those, right? But what I liked, you pointed it out earlier when you were talking about Bill and Ted being they're on this new journey where they it's called Face the Music, and it's they have to reckon with who they are and with where they are in life and with how they got there and really face themselves in a way, quite literally face themselves, right? In a way that they haven't had to before, and also face their face head on their failures, right? Which is hard for anybody. So I thought that was a really great way to take the story without making it just cool, and now our daughters are here, right? Because then the way that the daughters are inhabiting the story is they're trying to help with them, and they're, like you said, they're essentially going on that same kind of journey where they're trying to find people to help their dads with their music report, right?
Yeah.
And in that sense, it was really great because in the ways that Bill and Ted were ignorant of the people that they were going to pick up and learned along the way, these young women knew these people and intentionally sought out the best of the best. So to see them be so excited about meeting Jimi Hendrix or about meeting Mozart or, you know, like all of these, like to see that they were handpicked, not because they're in a history book, but because to these women, they had that choice, right? They could have gone anywhere and picked anyone. So that's another way that this film really inhabited or allowed women to make choices, you know, choices as to whether or not the princesses were going to stay with Bill and Ted, and choices as to who they believe is the best of the best, and who, if tasked with it, could write the best song, and also work with others too, right? Because that's another dynamic to this, right? So I thought that was a really great way to tell kind of that same journey, but to tell it in a different, newer way, you know, where it's more intentional. And I also really liked the way that they retconned, or not retconned, but like, yeah, I guess retconned, but like they chose to center women and make young women specifically the ones that saved the world. And I thought that was really interesting because so often women's contributions to history and to society are erased entirely, you know, and we only get the accounts of, again, the victors or the people in power or things like that. And all other records are like kind of like purged, you know, so like we don't know a lot, you know. But I thought that was really interesting that even in the future that's still happening, because even with this time travel technology and even with all of that, Bill and Ted are the ones that are being idolized by the people of 700 years into the future, when it really wasn't Bill and Ted, it was the daughters. And so that's another way that we're seeing patriarchy kind of play out 700 years into the future, right? Where it is assumed that these two last names are going to be these men. So very interesting when you kind of like dig into some of that bigger stuff. But yeah, so I thought it was progressive in those ways, and in maybe ways that it didn't intend. And I thought that it just really did evolve in a nice way.
I fully agree. You tripped something in my thought process about intention of influence. That was like, not, it wasn't really a through line, but it was like more of just casually there. So like when we're seeing the daughters, specifically them obviously having been influenced by their dads to the point where they're very much a version of their dad, but within the kindness, within the empathy, we're seeing all of those very intentional things taught to their daughters. But then when they go back with the intent of like getting these musicians, there's a fluency of influence where, like, in order to get Hendrix to say yes, they know Hendrix was influenced by Armstrong. So that's their like, oh, we know this. We're going to use this as a way to like get this person excited about it. Like, I don't know. There was just there was a level of intelligence and autonomy within that I liked a lot. I thought that was really great. Sorry. Yeah,
in the same way, like, yes, they, you know, they're their father's children. They have some of the same mannerisms, and yeah, they like music, but they like it in a different way where they don't play it, they appreciate it. And they, you know, they have their own tastes and their own styles and their own thoughts and opinions about this subject. So I thought that was a really cool way to show nuance to something as big as music, where it's like either like you like it or you don't or whatever. You know, there's so much nuance in music, right? And so I liked the way that they decided to build these characters was entirely on preference and choice in what kind of music they liked and what musicians that they liked, and then who they were going to be choosing to. So allowing them to have that much choice and that much freedom in who they are, I thought was really cool.
Yeah. It was a good movie.
Who do you think this was for?
Guitar Center. Guitar Center is a scam. JKLOL. I bought my drum set there.
I think that this was for Bill and Ted. I think this was for Keanu and Winters and just the van. Like, so one of the things that's cool in the way that they decided to bring this back And one of the reasons why I back this movie and movies and stories that do this, we talked about this a little bit in our Rocko's Modern Life episode. They brought them back, and they brought them back in a way that's critical, or in a way that they're like kind of writing, like choosing to write some of the things that maybe they skipped over. And so they're, again, like they made this movie about their choices and about the women in their lives, where, again, that wasn't a thing before. So I think, I think they also just wanted, because life is rough and it has been incredibly rough with this presidency. So like, just being like, you know what? Everybody needs a break. Everybody needs to smile. Let's remember this and let's vote in November,
Yeah, right. It
just
was,
to give us a break.
Yeah, it was a bit of a palate cleanser. Very just like a cleansing of sadness. Just like just a moment, like a vehicle for happiness, for joy, for in whatever infancy it is. It's just this level of kind of jovial nostalgia and funness that just existed for so many people with the first one. So seeing this at this time was, for a lot of people who connected with this property in the ways that they did, it was just such a nice, it's like taking a shower with a waterfall.
And it's also really nice to watch something where everybody attached to it, or like, at least, like Keanu Reeves 1,000% is that person that's really like, he's known for his kindness. He's known for all of this, but like in every interview, when people try to talk to him and be like, what did you think about this? He chooses to not center himself. It's nice to have somebody, or talk about work from somebody that is so intentional in, even the way that they are interviewed or the way that they talk about the work that they do.
Yeah, there's an egolessness to Keanu that I think is really impressive. From everything that I've read about him, he seems so incredibly gentle and egoless. He really, like, it just seems like he's just like, yeah, I'm just a person who's an actor, and that's it. Keanu, if you're listening, I don't know, let's like watch a movie or something. Let's just chill. I'll make the popcorn.
Okay, did you like it? I know we already covered this slightly.
I did like it.
Yeah, I liked this. I actually had to watch it twice, because the first time I watched it and took my notes, I had a couple of beverages, and then I watched it again. And yeah, it was good. It was cute. I didn't love it as much as I loved the first one, just because I think they're just so incredibly charming. And I think that there's some sort of magic that the first one has that this one doesn't have. But I liked a lot of what they did. So yeah, I'll watch this. I'll watch this again. Sure. Yeah.
Hell yeah.
All right. Well, I think that's it. Thank you so much for listening, everybody. We love you so much. You can find us on all social media. Tell your friends to listen and do the rate and subscribe thing. We love to know if we're doing a good job.
We love the attention, so please give us plenty.
Yeah. Also, you can write into us at NOTstalgiaPodcast@gmail.com, or on any of those social things. Just talk to us. Hi, we want to hear from you. Let us know what you want us to do, because like sometimes we're like, I don't know what we should do. So if you have a suggestion, like for real though, just like throw it out. We'd love to hear it. Anyways, we'd like to thank Danny Barkley for editing our podcast. And thank you, Eric.
Thank you, Jess. I love doing this podcast.
Me too. And remember, stay cute.
And stay critical. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for everything. Thank you for everything.
Excellent. And party on, dudes.
Party on, dudes.